It's a damp, drizzly, murky looking day down in Cornwall this morning, so I thought it's the ideal time to take some cuttings. And today I'm going to be taking some cuttings of one of my favourite plants. That is Hebe. So this variety here is a clone of a plant I bought about 8 years ago, and I have cloned it probably 20 or more times. Very easy to propagate from cuttings, and in late July, early August, you get these kind of pillows of whitish pink bobbly flowers on the shrub, and it looks really nice. So I like to propagate a few of these every year just to make sure I've got a decent stock of them. So yeah, I'll show you some of the Hebes I've got dotted around the garden. So down here in this little pot here, we've got this cutting that I took last year. So this is about just under a year old. It's doing pretty well. There's another one. There's another two down there. This one I just showed you a moment ago, I think is about 3 years old now. It's quite happy in that little pot there, but I'm pretty certain that's going to need to be potted on eventually, because it's probably quite root bound by now. Over here in this slightly larger pot, I've got a 2-year-old cutting that I potted on the other day. I think with a bit of extra space that's going to do quite well and increase in size. So this one over here is about 2 years old as well. It's in a small pot. You can see underneath the roots are coming through, so I can imagine that's quite root bound. So I think today I'll pot that on as well. Probably give it a little bit of a prune to help it bush out a bit as well. So I'm going to select this plant here because it's got lots of fresh growth on it. There's a few sort of yellowy looking leaves which probably indicate some kind of nutrient deficiency, so ideally you would want to choose shoots that are looking as healthy as possible. So yeah, all I do is I'll select a shoot about that sort of length, and I will snip just above a leaf bud. And I'll take a few of those around about that sort of length. It doesn't do the plant any damage at all. In fact, if anything, it helps the plant bush out when you give it a little bit of a prune like this. So I thought it would be a good idea to do these cuttings today, because it's been raining quite a lot in the last few days, and it's rained overnight, and it's still raining now actually. So all the plants in the garden will be turgid, i.e. full of water, and that is a good time to take the cuttings, because it means that the cuttings are less likely to dry out when you put them in the compost. So I've got my cutting material here. I've got a pot of, well, normally I would use seed and cutting compost and a bit of perlite mixed in, but I've run out of both, so I'm just using multi-purpose compost. I've pre-moistened it because once the cuttings are in the soil, I don't really want to then wash off the rooting gel that I'm going to be using. I've got my snippers. I've got a little dibbler to make little holes to put the cuttings in, and I have got Clonex rooting gel, which contains actual rooting hormone. It contains, you can see it here, it's indolyl butyric acid, IBA, which is a actual rooting hormone. A lot of the rooting powders you can get from different garden centres aren't actually, well, don't actually contain any rooting hormone. And as far as I'm aware, this is the only product available in the UK that contains IBA. So I've used it to good effect. So this is my rooting hormone of choice, really. If there are any other rooting hormones that people are aware of that are available in the UK, please let me know, because I'd be very interested to see what they are. So anyway, I'm getting to the end of this bottle. So ordinarily what I would do is I'd decant a little bit of the rooting hormone into a little dish, but because literally I've got barely any left, I'm going to be dipping the cuttings in here. So first thing I need to do is prepare the actual cuttings. So with Hebes, you need to cut just below a leaf node, so just there, and you're left with these two leaves here, and then you strip them back, and you strip some of the leaves further up the stem back as well. The reason why you want to do that is that if you leave too many leaves on, then the cutting will lose too much moisture too quickly and then dry out and die. So that's probably enough. What I'm going to do is also cut the tip out like that, and then I'm left with these 4 leaves. I'm sure other people might do it differently, but this seems to work for me. Right, and then I'm just going to turn this up a bit so that the gel comes down to the top of the bottle. And I'm just going to dip it in there. As I said, what I would normally do is tip a little bit of gel onto a small dish, and the reason why I do that is to avoid any contamination, but I'm literally coming to the end of this bottle now, so it's not going to make any difference whether I do that or not. So I've given the stem a good coating. I'm just going to dib a little hole in the very edge of the pot, like that, and then pop the cutting in there, and then just firm up around it. Now, apparently the reason why you put the cuttings at the edge of the pot is because that dries out slower, so apparently it maintains more moisture around the edge, so it's a better place to put the cutting around the edge rather than in the middle. So yeah, I'm going to do the same with all the rest of these now. So there we are, all the cuttings are now in the compost all around the edge of the pot there. As I said, I'd normally use seed and cutting compost because it contains less organic material and less bacteria. So one of the things that can happen with your cutting is that there's too much organic matter in with the compost, then it can encourage rotting, so the cuttings rot off before they root. However, these Hebes are pretty tough, so I'm sure they will root pretty well. So all I need to do now is put them in a good location in order to root. So I'm going to show you where I put my cuttings. So I use a sealed clear tote box to put my cuttings in, so it acts like a little sort of greenhouse and maintains all the humidity, and humidity is key when rooting cuttings. I've positioned it in a place in the garden where the sun never actually gets to it, because if the sun hits that box, it effectively would cook the cuttings, and that's happened to me before. But basically the sun tracks across the sky from there and just kind of goes all the way up there and then behind this extension here. So the sun rays never actually hit this box at all, so it's the ideal place. In fact, it's the only place in the garden where I can guarantee the sun never hits, so that's why I've positioned it there. So I'm just going to open the lid up here. So I'll clean those leaves out in a moment, but you can see already I've put some clematis cuttings in there. I'm not sure whether they're rooting yet. Give them a little pull, and if you feel any resistance, then they're forming roots. They've only been in here 3 weeks, so don't feel like they're developing roots yet, but that's fine. I'll just leave them in there. They're still looking green and not wilting, so that's a good sign. And then I'll just put my Hebes in here as well. So as I said, I pre-moistened the compost, and that should, in this tub, remain moist for quite some time. So you don't really need to water them very much, if at all. I mean, I put these in here 3 weeks ago, and that compost is still slightly moist, so ideal environment for them, really. So I'm just going to pop the lid back on there now. But yeah, the Hebe's a relatively easy plant to root, and it's a good way to stock up your garden for free. All you need is a tote box like that and some, ideally some seed and cut and compost and maybe some perlite, and the rooting gel is very useful. You don't have to use it, but it seems to improve your chances of rooting some cuttings. So yeah. What I'm going to do now is pot on that Hebe that I mentioned probably needed to be potted on. Okay, so I've got my pot that I'm going to pot it into. As you can see, I've drilled plenty of holes in there for increased drainage. So you can see how root bound that was. Definitely needed to be repotted. And yeah, and as I said, I'm just going to give it a little bit of a prune, just to kind of help it bush out a bit, get rid of some of the woody dead stuff. So it's obviously reduced the size quite a lot there, but that will encourage it to bush out and get a nice bushy plant. So all I need to do now is water it in, and we're all done.